Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the Distance Learning and Technology Virtual Conference. I'm very excited to have you join us. Day 1 was a fantastic turnout. We had over 100 people participating in each of our webinars. A lot of good engagement, and we're looking forward to that same engagement this afternoon. And let me introduce Dr. Glenda Rose. Glenda coordinates adult education services in 3 rural counties for Community Action, Inc. of Central Texas. She's worked in adult education at many levels, from volunteer to executive director for over 25 years. She provides workshops on many subjects, including distance learning, technology integration, and adult learning, and has presented at the local, state, national, and international conferences, where she presented at TESOL in Korea. She is an author and a certified accessibility specialist with the Texas Distance Learning Association. So Glenda, I want to welcome you.
All right, so we have a little less than an hour. I'm going to just do basically a show and tell about the experience we have with integrated EL Civics, our Microsoft Office Specialist certification. We were working on Word and Excel, the core Word and Excel certifications, and I will come back to that in just a little bit. What I would like for you to be able to do at the end of this session is to be able to define what integrated EL Civics education is in terms of WIOA, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and also to identify the key components of an integrated education and training course as required by TWC, AEL, and be able to develop a syllabus, get some ideas for developing your syllabus for an IELCE Microsoft Office Specialist Certification course if you decide you want to go that way. So what is integrated EL Civics? This is the WIOA version. In the law, it says that services for adult English language learners with or without a credential from another country. So these services for the integrated EL Civics is for any English language learner, adult English language learner, including professionals. And it is so that they can achieve competency in English, and then they acquire also the basic and more advanced skills needed to function. So they need to step up a little bit from what they were before. There was a little bit more to it, though. It has to have 3 components, according to the law. They have to have some instruction on the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. That is key to it. That's why it's called EL Civics. Not just citizenship as in preparing for the citizenship interview, but also civic participation. What are our rights and responsibilities as residents or citizens in the United States? And according to WIOA, it also has to include literacy. So literacy, by definition from them, is reading, writing, and speaking in English, but it also includes things like computing and solving problems in a way that would make you capable to run your family or to get a job or just to function in society. And then, of course, it can, according to WIOA, include workforce training. So these are the funds. We have to look for in-demand industries. So you can't just teach somebody some sort of skill. It has to be in demand in your area. And it has to be occupations that have a living wage, that are going to make it possible for them to be able to survive. In-demand industry means ones that the state or the area has identified as going to contribute to the growth or stability of other businesses or other industry sectors. So they're growth positions, they're growth careers. I'm just going through this part of it before we get into the actual weeds of what the course looks like to make sure we all have the same language and what the expectations are for an IELCE program. So economic self-sufficiency means that they are not having to be on government assistance. They don't qualify because they make too much money. And that is a moving target. This is from this year's poverty level. So if you're making $6.13 an hour, somebody's in trouble, and also you're not making enough money to survive for one person, right? That's not enough money for one person. And honestly, you really want to get closer over here to the 250 if you can, because that's going to be more comfortable. But this is what it's looking at. Most of our students have at least a couple of kids. So let's look at, if you have a household size of 4, the poverty line is $12.59 an hour. So if they're not making at least $12.59, they're on the poverty line. To get above that, you need to be making at least $16.47 an hour. So somewhere around $16.50 an hour, $16.50 to $17 an hour would be more comfortable for them. So that's what I'm thinking of in terms of economic self-sufficiency. By the way, I use this chart when we do registration when students don't know if they're low income or not. So I'm in the rural capital area, so we're the donut around Austin, and I'm on the east side, so I'm closer to Houston. I've got Bastrop, I've got Lee County, which is where Giddings is, and then I have part of Fayette, LaGrange. And looking at the rural capital area data, we find that office clerks and customer service representatives are in the in-demand list. They're on the in-demand list. They're expecting to need more of them over the next few years, a 10 to 13% increase respectively. And the average rate in 2017, I think it is, was $17.60 and $15.45 per hour. So if I can get someone into a position of office clerk and they have the skills especially with Word and Excel and the Microsoft Office tools that everybody uses, they have a good chance from going from a very low wage job to a higher wage job. Secretaries are also on that list. They make about $16.45 a couple of years ago. And then the interesting thing is you always want to think about where they would go after that. So you get an initial office job. You're just an office clerk and you're making, $15.45 an hour or $17.60 an hour. But if you become an office supervisor, an office manager, you could be making around $28 an hour on average. And that's a substantial increase and an opportunity for growth. That comes from, I did put the source here, this is the Rural Capital Headlight, which is the data for our area. Where is the chart for other Texas areas? So yes, I went to our Workforce Board's website. I looked at our Workforce Board's data, and I justified our doing this particular program based on the data that was there. So now I want to talk a little bit about TWC. So we talked about WIOA, said it had to have EL Civics, has to have literacy, English language, and citizenship and civic participation. The guidance from TWC has an added requirement here. It also has to include training for an in-demand industry or living wage job. Remember, under WIOA, it said may include training. Under TWC, it will include training. It's not really considered EL Civics, integrated EL Civics, unless it includes that training piece. One of the parts of this letter, these letters are on the TCAL website, says be provided in combination with IET, including AEL activities and workforce preparation activities. So workforce preparation activities is something that I focused on in the course. So those include things like using resources, using information, working with others, understanding systems, college and career transition skills. So, there's all kinds of other employability skills. It's basically your 21st century skills that you would need to function well in a job. So these workforce preparation activities, in addition to the technical training of learning the skill, are important. So for this course, the Microsoft Office Specialist Course Certification, we're using their data. Let me come over here and go show that to you. So if you want to know more about this certification process, then you can come over here and find out what it is involved. It has details about all of the different tests, what the exam is. If you look at the exam information, it will tell you exactly what you need to do. It does cost money. We do ours through Certiport, and we do pay for our students if they complete all the requirements. I did initially download this. This is a nice little document to have, just to show you what is going to be tested and to make sure you know how it's going to work. I also went through the exam myself first to see what was on it, although I did learn some things, though. I'm fairly proficient on a computer, but going through the course I did learn a few tips and tricks that were nice, so you can always go through it yourself. So when we're thinking about building this integrated EL Civics class, this program, we have these four major components that we have to include. We have the exam prep. That's the technical skill that's going to help them get a job. So we have to have that piece. We have to have the English language and the civics, and then we also need to include workforce prep in there. In thinking about this, I also had to decide, was I going to do this as a Spanish with ESL support, because there are, of course, Microsoft is international, there are Spanish versions of the courses, or was I going to do it in English? Initially, actually, we thought about having them do the reading in Spanish and do the activities in English, and that did not work. And it was just too confusing. The English is fairly intense, so we did require that they be at least at an intermediate level of English to be able to participate in the course. That turned out to be key, and I'll explain why in a bit. We also had to figure out if they could use a computer and if they had the ability to do the basic stuff on the computer. We did get one sneak in who wasn't proficient with a mouse, but after a week or two, we got her up to speed. But most of them we screened to make sure that they were comfortable using a keyboard, not just their phone. That turned out to be very useful. We also we actually overbooked. We had a computer lab that had 10 computers in it, and we had 14 people who wanted to take it. We ended up with 12 plus my assistant. So we were short computers in the lab, and so we actually had them bring laptops, and most of them, over half of them had laptops by the time we were done. And then you have to think about how you're going to design this. So when you're thinking about an integrated education and training, it has to be concurrent information. So you can do things like every other day would be concurrent, but you can't do one semester of English and then one semester of training. It doesn't work that way. They have to be working at the same time. In this particular course, because I am an ESL specialist and I'm also a technology specialist, I didn't do two teachers. I had a fully integrated class, and we split it. It was a 3-hour class 3 times a week, and we split. The first half was the ESL civics workforce prep type of thing, but it was integrated with the exam prep that we did in the second half of the class. So let me tell you what we used for the exam prep. One of the first things that I realized was my students did not have sufficient typing speed to pass that test. The test is an hour long, and it may not be the content that holds them back, but being able to type quickly. So we used typing.com. You can have a free class. It's a teacher login, a student login, and this let me see what they were doing, what lessons they were on. Now, some of them didn't have laptops in the beginning, so you may question how I assigned homework for them to practice typing at home. Well, you can buy a little Bluetooth keyboard that'll work with your phone for about $10. Bluetooth keyboard that'll work with your phone, and they're not really expensive. I actually got mine from, while the store was still open, the Five and Below store. They had them. So you can find them $5 to $10, and then we bought them and let them take them home to practice. But there's a bunch of them, and you can find them cheaper. That way, they could go onto the website, the typing.com website. They could use their phone and still practice the typing activities. The other thing that we used was a program called Jasper Active. How many of you are familiar with Jasper Active? Yeah, they had to set a typing goal every week, print it out. We kept it in their portfolio so they could see what their next goal was. Okay, so this is Jasper Active. I'm going to log in as a student. And Jasper Active does allow you to do English or Spanish, and that was one of the decisions we made. We just found that English was the way to go. It was better to do it in English. So let me go into the core course here. Let me show it to you a little bit. Okay, a couple questions about typing.com. Yeah, I see that. Yes, it does show you their progress. It also shows you what keys they've learned, how fast they've gone over how they are improving or not improving. Okay, so this is what it looks like when the students come in. They have these lessons across the top and the tabs. And the first thing that they're supposed to do, not that any of them actually did this, is the reading. Why would you bother to read the instructions before trying it? Okay, so this is what they're learning in that unit. I will show you also on the teacher side for the classroom.
And also, did you have a speed that they needed to be at to be successful?
I told them they needed to be at least 20 to 25 words per minute.
Okay.
They started off like at 6. So they had a little work to do on that side.
Yep.
No, here they are. So you can actually, as a teacher, download all of the lesson presentations to use in your class. So they have the PowerPoints ready for you for your class, which is nice. So before we actually get to practice, we can go through the content, and if they've done the reading, it makes a lot more sense. But if they don't, at least I have it for them. I also know what all the exercises are, and that makes it useful too. So after they finish the reading, and perhaps after we've gone through the PowerPoint together or any of the lessons together, they have a Learn button. Now I can't do the Learn button because I've already finished this one. But if they don't get everything in that Learn correct, then they have to go into Practice. And it'll take them back. It takes over your computer. I had to teach my antivirus software that it was not a virus because it does take over your computer. So I have my Jasper Active content over here on the right, and my Word is over here. And it tells you exactly what to do. Click File. Click New, click Blank Document. And so they just followed the instructions as they were going through. And then when you get down to the end of them, you can mark it answered. You don't have to. I never did quite get them to understand that you don't have to mark it answered. And then you submit. Now, if I submit this one, I've already finished it, so it's not going to count it wrong, but it would mark it as incorrect because I didn't finish the process. and then it returns to Jasper Active, and you go to the next lesson. Is that clear for everybody?
Folks are saying
Geometrics is
yes.
actually another one. We actually do some of the pre-testing on that. So when they get to the end of the Word lesson, they actually have a project that they have to do, and it has to include certain things. And then it's submitted, and then they go over to Geometrics, and Geometrics has some practice tests. We require that they have at least an 850, 900 before they go and take the real test. Like I said, we're paying for that, so we want to have a pretty good feeling that they're going to pass it. We can't always be sure, but we would like to have a pretty good idea. Jasper Active is not free, and I don't know the pricing on it. I could get you a hold of Heather, and maybe she could tell you. We were using this in an ABE class. So this is the EL Civics version. Our program already had this for English speakers. They actually had one semester where they did it for Spanish speakers, but nobody knows where that syllabus went, so we had to kind of start from scratch, and it was okay. So they take, and then they have the reviews also. So I think Geometrics is another good product to go on to. So let me go back over this. We have the typing, because you have to have the typing speed to be able to finish that test. And then we had Jasper Active, where they were going through piece by piece. Now, what I found was that it was insufficient. And so I needed to add in this Microsoft Office study guide, which has practice tests in it and practice activities in it. The English in it's a little simpler than in the Jasper Active explanations and PowerPoints, so that made it easier for my students, and it was easier for me to review. The score on Geometrics, we're asking for an 850 or 900. We found that those tests are easier than the actual test, and so they need to be a little bit higher to pass than they would be on the actual test.
Yeah, someone's asking about the score. Blanca, I use the study guide as my teaching tool, and Geometrics as pre-assessments, which determines when the student is ready for the exam.
Right. That's kind of what we're doing we're just doing it with Jasper Active. So we're using the Jasper Active in combination with the study guide, and then we had to do a little bit more that I'll talk about to make sure that we were ready to go. So integrated EL Civics includes English language, and I started off with a different, my syllabus was a little bit different in the beginning, and I found that what I really needed to do to truly integrate this course was to have the students do some research. We used content from Breaking News English for articles. We used the English, of course, in Jasper Active, but a lot of the English language that we did had to do with the projects that they had to do using the skills that they were learning in Word. I'll come back to that in just a few minutes. And then there was workforce prep, and we did quite a bit of workforce prep. We did some exercises on ONET was one of our activities. We did exercises with job interviews and creating tables, integrating that with the Word skills that they were learning. I can show you some of those. We talked about why men in brown shoes don't get hired, which was an article from Breaking News English, and talked about what to wear and not to wear to a job interview. And it was really fun because we said, well, what if you're going to a construction site for a job? You really don't want to dress like this guy, right? So making sure that your dress is appropriate. We also practiced writing emails of inquiry to companies. So that was really good. In the civics part of this, we had these projects, and the projects, some of them were not civics, of course, some of them were like, tell me about your hometown or your favorite thing, but we also included things like, tell me about an American symbol. So here's one on the American flag, and then this one was on Sojourner Truth, and she was so impressed. The student was just amazed by this. It made her wanted to go to law school, actually. It was very interesting. Okay, I'm going to go back before we go to lessons learned.
And then Carol was asking, how long was your class?
It was 4 months. We actually ended up not finishing because of COVID-19. I still have to get most of the people tested. I've had one that actually completed, got her certificate fine. A couple others that are ready, but we have to wait till we're able to test. So I'm right now going with them on WhatsApp, and I'm actually sending them little exercises every day to keep them in review so they'll be ready for the test. So this is an example of the interview table project. So they were studying tables in the word part, and they had to create a table with colors and bands and using templates and write out their answers to some of the questions that we had looked at from monster.com. We looked at the 100 questions from monster.com. So they had different levels of success. This one looks pretty good, don't you think? I think she did a pretty good job.
Glenda, someone's asking about the Civics website. Are they talking about the Breaking News English website?
I didn't really use a Civics website. I mainly made them do Civics projects.
So the Breaking News English is a website that has lessons,
Right. And the one that I know that we used from there that I remember very clearly was when we were talking about interviews and what's appropriate to wear. There's an article on there for about men in brown shoes not getting hired.
Right.
What it's about.
And that was on Breaking News English.
Yeah. So it
Yeah.
was really good. It was at their level. It was easy to read. We could study the language and still incorporate that. Can you use the USCIS website for the civics? Yeah, I could, but I was more interested in them using their skills. So I could have sent them there, I guess, but I'm a project-based learning person, so I wanted them to go and find stuff and tell it to the rest of the class rather than me giving them the information. But yeah, USCIS has a great website. So this one, not quite as nice. So they had varying degrees of ability, but they were so impressed with their portfolios. They were all excited when I would bring all of the documents back and print them on a color printer and bring them back to them the next week, and then they would share them. So that was the interview project. We had the Women in History project. You saw the one. This was another fun one. You saw the one about Sojourner Truth. There was one on the last Queen of Hawaii, and I'm not even going to attempt it because I'll probably butcher her name. So this turned out really good. She did. She was playing with the different kinds of alignment here, and inserting pictures was part of the task. And so I think she did a really good job on this one. So these are intermediate level ESL. They're not perfect. One of the things that I had to get on some of the students about was not copying and pasting from Wikipedia. If I caught that, I would erase it all and tell them to start over, that they had to put it in their own words. It did not work to do it that way. And you can tell when they copy and paste because you can see they copy incomplete sentences. But they were all very engaged with the civics type activities that we did, as well as with the workforce preparation ones. Show you our syllabus, initial syllabus. And I honestly didn't start out with those projects tying into what they were doing in Word. I initially started out with basically the PowerPoints and using the English there and bringing out the different features of the language in those PowerPoints. But what I found that they were doing is going through the Jasper Active and following the directions very well and not having any idea what they were doing. So they are very good at following directions, but they were not so good at comprehending why they were doing the specific steps they were doing to accomplish their goal. So this is our syllabus, and I'm going to come down here. So we have our activities, and then we also have our ESL lesson. One of our main goals was that they would have a resume at the end. We didn't quite get that far. We got about halfway through it. What did we use for that? Oh, we used the Steck Von on the job series for that, for developing their resume. But every lesson had activities in Word, the ESL lesson that included the civics and the workforce preparation activities, and then, of course, aligned to our content standards. Here was the ONET activity. They were very engaged in the ONET activity. They were glued to their computers. I think I have a picture of them glued to their computers for that one. But they were just very much engaged with those. I had a couple of months to put it together. Somebody's asking, how long did it take you to put this program together? But I wasn't putting it together completely from scratch. Remember that we already had a program for English language speakers. So my main goal was to put it into an intermediate ESL format.
Are you willing to share the syllabus?
Yes, that's fine. This is a fun one. It was the identifying fake news. That's under digital literacy, which is also part of literacy. The tree octopus and the octopus tree. That was a really good one. And then you notice that here in week 6, which was supposed to be the first week of March, we were supposed to have the word certification test. Well, that turned out to be too ambitious. We were initially planning on doing both Word and Excel. Now, to qualify as an IEL Civics program, it does not have to have both. They need to have one certification that's nationally recognized. And we ended up, except for one person, just basically continuing to work on Word. So I can share the syllabus, but I will tell you that after this week, my lesson plans became very different. They also didn't quite line up with the times because I needed to spend more time on different things. You like the style of this format? That's what I learned. One of the things I learned going through the course myself. Haha. I got very, very proficient in Word at that point. Here, syllabus, and I had it in English and Spanish.
And Lori's asking if we can put it in the IET COP.
You know what? I just realized my phone number and Dale's phone number and Heather's phone number's on there, but okay.
Yeah, guys, so please be discreet. And
so my lesson plans are not going to line up with the syllabus anymore. So this is the lesson plan from March 3rd when they should have been done and getting ready for their test. And I had to backtrack a little bit. And so here was my objective: create a chart. That's part of my technical skill with common interview questions. That's the workforce prep and their personal responses, including citizenship and also English in that. So I had a handout for them. And then because of the way that we had it in teams, it was really kind of interesting. We taught 12 to 1:30. They signed in and out for that class. And then the training class, they signed back in for. So we had 2 sets of sign-in sheets for every class. And then we had their JASPER active, their assessment. So I'm just showing you that all the best laid intentions with the syllabus, as much time as we spent on it, was too ambitious for this level of student. So when I do this again, I will only focus on Word. It'll still be the same length of time, but it'll be slower and a little more deliberate about making sure that they get the skills integrated at that time.
Someone's asking sample lesson plan.
I can do, this one's probably a good one.
This is very helpful for them, Glenda. Thank you.
Just sharing what I learned don't work. Okay, this is our U.S. symbols. This was actually a really fun one. So let me share this one with you too.
Yeah, one you shared was in Spanish.
Oh, the syllabus was in Spanish. So yeah, I gave them the syllabus both in English and Spanish to make sure that they were very clear about the expectations. I will tell you, this is adult education, right? When they tried to get into this class, I said, this is a college level class. You don't show up to class, I will drop you. I had great attendance. I did not have any issue with attendance. One of them had surgery and said, please don't drop me. I'm like, I'm not going to drop you for surgery. Come on, guys.
Yeah, really.
But, we had assignments. Here's an example of that famous Women in History assignment. Pick a person, do the research, and write the report. And then notice here, in part of this integrated part here, is that they had to use the skills that we were doing in Word at that time. So it wasn't just write a report any way you want. You have to add a picture. You have to add a frame, because I want to make sure that they have their English. They have an introductory sentence, 3 to 4 sentences, and a concluding sentence. I wanted to make sure that they were doing their English properly, but I also wanted to make sure that they were doing their technical skills that they needed for certification. Sure, I can share that one with you. So they had this part of the work outline, the resume thing. We had to do this. They had to write about their strengths and weaknesses, and we had done a lot of different things, like an edited Myers-Briggs personality traits presentation that we talked about, what might be a good job for you based on your Myers-Briggs rough score. So that was kind of fun. They thought that was fascinating and how close it came to really identifying them. So that was really kind of fun. Okay, I know I've got about 15 minutes left, but I will open it to questions or sharing anything else you want me to share. I will tell you, these are my lesson learned. Again, following directions does not mean you know what you're doing. So I had one of the students get so angry at me because I would not tell her exactly what to do on the practice test. Isn't that awful? And she just got so angry, and she was so upset with me because, in class when they're working, of course, if they don't understand the directions, I'm helping them with the directions. But when they are doing the practice test and I need to see if they're ready for the real test that we're going to pay for, I can't help them with that. So they really had to go back and make sure they understood what they were doing, not just following the directions. I found about halfway through I needed to align the activities in the EL Civics class to the activities in the training portion of the class. There is no reason why, especially in a Word training for certification, that you can't do both. The created portfolios, they were awesome. They loved those portfolios. And then the typing speed, getting those Bluetooth keyboards to practice. And then the biggest problem we've had for the people who have, well, there's only one person who's tried who didn't pass so far, and it was the English. It was not the skills. One of the sharpest Word users in the group, but got confused by the English. And that kind of scared her and then scared the other people, because if she couldn't pass, then they can't. So now I'm rebuilding confidence in them right now by doing the WhatsApp activities and making sure that they're staying on track. All right. Anything else you want me to show you or have questions about?
Carol had a question. What credential did they get at the end to verify that it was an official IET?
The Microsoft Office Specialist Certification. That was one of the first websites, I think. Let me see. Let me go back. Yeah, you'll have to, some of these you'd have to clean up. The ones that are in Word are probably accessible because part of their training was to go in here and check for accessibility. No accessibility issues found. The Myers-Briggs came from somebody else, so that one may have some definite accessibility issues. But this was the ONET exploration where they went on to ONET and they had to answer these questions and then type it up for us.
So someone's looking for the ONET exploration form.
Yes, it's a PDF file and pretty much it has phrases, resume phrases that attract employers.
Okay, cool.
Well. So yes, I did. I'm just trying to share stuff with
I appreciate it. Okay, thanks.
No,
Thank you.
I did actually print this out for them also.
Yes.
The little cheat sheet.
Yes, it's a cheat sheet. Yes. I think I'm, it makes me feel pretty much good. I think I'm on the right track because I've done pretty much everything. I don't use Jasper Active. I use the geometrics. As far as skills, the soft skills, resume writing, cover letters, and all that stuff I've been doing in my classroom. So I think I'm on the right track. Thank you.
Well, I would love to hear those of you who are doing it. My next step is I am trying to do this online as a remote instruction. I'm going to try it with my English speakers first, though. I'm not going to try it with my Spanish speakers. So anything else that you
Yeah,
guys
there was another question. Mara Hernandez, the students only received certification on the test they took, right? Like Word or Excel, whichever test they took. And that qualified as a measurable gain, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Diana, just looking for some advice. I will have a 3-hour class twice a week. This will be my first time teaching in the fall. So this is some good resources for you, Diana.
Yes, I did hear that, Don, that Certiport is going to offer testing soon from home. So I am looking forward to trying to get that done. I am actually still able to go one-on-one in my office, but I need to make sure my students feel comfortable.
Anybody else have other questions? Think about all those things that she just sent you. She is an expert in this. You've got her attention for another 10 minutes.
And anyone else who's done it, if you want to share what you've done that's worked. I mean,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't have all the answers on this. I'm showing you what mistakes I made and how it worked out. But I am much happier the next time I present this or do this course. I am much happier.
May I share if I may?
Absolutely, Blanca.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been doing this for the past almost 4 years, and definitely what has helped and what has worked for me is that study guide. And that study guide is, it's my Bible, it's my teaching tool. And we go over it, an objective a day, sometimes a couple of objectives, because sometimes the objectives are really short. And at the end of the book, we go backwards, but we drill on every practice task. The drilling comes in handy because it's a 50-minute time test. So the drilling comes very handy. So we go backwards with just drilling on the practice. And then I start with the pre-assessments using the geometrics as the assessment tool. Mm-hmm. Once I have 85% at least 4 geometrics testing, then that tells me that the student is ready for the exam, and it never fails. If those 4 exams are above 85, they pass it. So that what has worked for me, and I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what we found too. About 850 to 900, 85 to 90 is what we needed to get them to pass the test.
Does anybody else have anything to share? What you've been doing if you've been having these classes?
The study guide, I'll show it to you again. This is the Microsoft Office 2016 study guide for the exam.
Correct.
And it comes with practice files. Okay, somebody's asking about 0-level students. Unless you're going to do this in Spanish for Spanish speakers, I would not do this with 0-level students. I would not. They need to be intermediate English. You could do a precursor to the integrated EL Civics, some sort of pre-course that helps them get their English for this type of, following these kinds of directions and understanding this language, because this language is pretty advanced. It was really funny. We were arguing about, there was a word in the Spanish text that my assistant, who's from Mexico, did not believe me that I knew what the word was, and she called her sister in Mexico, and she's like, "Oh, that really is it." I'm like, yeah, because it's not language you use every day. It's very specific language.
Wow. Anybody else?
And these are those exams that she's talking about, the practice exams here. If you can get through those practice exams, you're gonna do okay. Sangrar for indent. That was the boy was asking me what Spanish word was it.
Yep.
Yeah, really. And see, nobody believes me either, because I've had it come up when I was in college in some advanced Spanish classes, and it always made me laugh because it sounds like bleeding. I guess because the line's red. I have no idea.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I want to thank Glenda for taking the time to share all these resources with us today, Glenda.